Blessed Be the Vampire by Dana Lee. Chapter 5. Dana. For a moment I thought that I was alive, only dreaming, turning around and looking for someone who wasn't there. That voice. Wake up, sleepyhead, always sleeping. I was there with you, you know. Always there with you while you were sleeping. It seemed as if it was evening again, perpetual evening. I swallowed and my throat seemed to close, scorched on too hot soup. You must be thirsty here. There was a mahogany tea cart set up against the bed. There was a black fringed shawl on the top tray. On it weighed a glass decanter with a crystal stopper filled red, and an empty glass goblet that said "Have fun" written across it. It's blood, I whispered. This is all that you need now, ever. The blood is the life. My head seemed to fire, fiery red and black shapes behind my eyes, and my throat opened. My mouth watered down my face. So I don't need you? You will want me. Have wanted me always. It will all come back to you. He unstopped the decanter and poured the unclean wine into the glass. I could smell it, sickeningly sweet, beguiling as his bloody grin. He wore a large carnelian ring set in cut silver on his left hand. You see, my child, you will not have to break your commandments. He looked at me and smiled. You have not broken many. You will never have to kill, never with me. Here, drink. He held the glass to my dry lips. It is your atonement, your salvation. I pushed the glass away and it spattered against the bed before falling to the floor. He groaned. Wasteful, just like Mother said. Now you're going to need more. My hot throat constricted me again. My voice was the shadow of a whisper. What commandments have I broken? What? He laughed out loud, got up, and came around to the other side of the bed, picking up his glass. He came in my face again. Oh, Dana, you have always been naughty. Born that way. Can't help it. It's in the blood. Think about it. Tom, Scott, Dan, Cheryl, oh, especially Mother, naughty, thirsty. They know about me, too, you know. What do they know? It hurt to whisper. I hurt, and my whole body seemed whipped, bled, and strained. Surely I would die now. Die or wake up from this nightmarish fantasy. Don't strain yourself, beloved, rest. I will bring you some more and leave it by the door. You must drink to live. I lay back in the bed like Lenore in the boat. He lit the lamp and set it next to the bed. I could see his strong, flawless face in the flicker of flame. I will die. But you already have. There is no other way but deliverance, my angel. I could hear the roll and clink of the cart as he pushed it out of the room and down the dark hall. Chapter 6. The terror, the pain of the belladonna berries was nothing next to this. When I was sick back then, I withstood it all, hellish flames licking, singeing my thigh, black pounding head. But when I found my soul tearing away, fighting to free itself from my torture, and the delirium and hair-pulling set in, I could take it no longer. Oh, my soul, where was it? With Paul, who I couldn't even call to mind without a painful explosion of my inside? Drink, my darling, drink, and you will be free of pain forever. I could hear his voice reverberating within the canyons of my head. If I would sit up, I would fall back down into the bed with the darkness and the red resounding all around me. My mouth dropped open and my eyes twitched, furious moths. I could smell it over there in the glass decanter, the elixir, the miracle cure. My stomach retched, and I gagged, screamed, and kicked as if I was just being born. I heard the click of the lock and the clink of the bottle and the soft clug-clug as he poured the second glass. I could not hear his footsteps, and my eyes were blinded except for the hot red. This is my blood. Drink from me and live forever. He was pouring it down my throat, and it was splashing down my chin and over my chest. No, I spat and howled, up now on my knees, screaming, pulling my hair. It's over, all over now, and your life, your afterlife, has only just begun. I'll leave you now, love, settle. I'll leave the door open from now on, but don't try to leave the house yet. Wait for me. I won't ever leave you for long. I never have." He left the room spinning to oblivion, and through my cursed mind I heard the screams of the damned. "Drink no blood, blasphemer. Kill a sorceress. Honor thy mother." On and on they raged, tormenting me, so that again I fell back. I felt the thump of something like a heart again, and the peace of my body was restored. I glanced down at the blood-stained bed only to realize that it was clean. No spots of blood. Even if he had cleaned it after my first spill, there should have been the markings of my second. Nothing. My heart began to ache, and I could feel the new teeth breaking out. I'm 33, but my wisdom teeth just started to come this year. I ran to the mirror to see in the dark, and I could. I always have had bad eyes, a genetic defect, but like with most everything, where you are lacking in one thing, God makes up for another. His gifts, my second sight, my night vision. When I was in the 3rd grade, there was a solar eclipse. Our teachers had warned us for weeks prior not to look into the sun or we would be blinded. When I was 3, my parents bought me a child's stove, a real electric stove that cooked, no less, only very small. My dad told me, "Don't touch the burner, hot," as I did exactly that, scorching my little hand. They cut the wiring out of that stove Christmas Day. I stuck a fork in the light socket. I stared at the eclipse. I got my first pair of glasses that year. I've worn them since, rely on them, love them. Men don't bother me if I'm wearing my glasses. But now, I could see perfectly in the dark. The room was an amber glow. My pupils were slits, eyes of the cat. My teeth, there must be 60 of them, all sharp like a dragon. But there was not a trace of blood on my face or gown. A mark, a red heart, was on my chest that wasn't there before. Paul has the same mark on his ass. His mother said that he was due on Valentine's Day, but came late. He got to keep the heart. I knew I still had his. I could hear the mice in the ceiling and the insects beneath the house. Leviticus's electricity was gone. I could hear the birds and knew that the sun must be rising. Chapter 7. The door was open, as he told me it would be, and I dragged myself over the Persian carpet into the hardwood hallway. There I was greeted by a wooden banister. Looking over, I saw that I was on the 3rd floor of a tall house. The place was old, turn of the century. There was just one other door at the end of the hall, and it was locked, so I proceeded downstairs. The tall windows were hung heavily with velvet and lace and let in little light. There were cobwebs stretched about the corners, and the paint was yellowed, cracked, and chipped. Of the 3 doors on the 2nd floor, one was open. It was a library filled with books. A huge teak desk resided in the center of the room, scattered with paper and the spent white wax of candles. There was a thick russet carpet covered in a tattered gold oriental. The walls were obliterated with rows and rows of books, 20 feet high. I turned on the light. Electricity here. There on the desk was an old leather-bound journal. I opened it. Leviticus. I closed it. He left it here on purpose for me to find and read. Why should I? Would I grant him that? That satisfaction? No. I turned to go and sat down in the cushioned wooden chair. Damn, what a diabolical demon. Me, the writer, the English teacher. I laughed, shaking my head, and like Pandora opened the book and bit the apple. I was born before our Lord Savior Jesus Christ. God was not so forgiving at that time. Remember, people were foul. My father was a priest, my mother his concubine. I remember the last words that my father spat in my face through his frizzy beard. You are not my son, you are demon spawn. This was while he fed me my mother's heart on a plate before he cast me out on the road, like he did to my mother before at the crossroads in the town of Beth, in the hills near Jerusalem. The place was surely cursed by God as I was. My mother was a Philistine, a curse sent from God, a thorn in the side for the Jews. He made her breathtakingly beautiful and sweet of heart to serve his purpose. She had a honeyed voice and could tame the bees. She was a prophetess and had visions. She grew up wealthy in her father's orchards, until my father stole her, choked her with a cloth soaked in vinegar, and raped her. Then he kept her for his concubine in the dust and dirt of the city. Then she got the white streak when she gave birth to me. He said that this was a sign that I was a demon and that she should offer me unto the Lord to take. She ran away with me as a newborn back to her father's estate to hide. He came for her then, with his ass and his slave. I have come to take your daughter back home with me. This seemed perfectly well to my grandfather, since my mother was fallen fruit to him and I was the worm. So he fed my father for 3 days before we were back on the road to Beth. My mother begged her father to let us stay, but he said, "The man is a priest chosen by God, the God of the Jews. Surely, daughter, we have not suffered enough under the curse of the Jews and their God? No, you must go with him. This arrangement is good. He is sending me many goats and loads of silver." So he sold us gladly to my father Levi, who told my mother that the Lord would provide for us. The trip I asked took 3 days, longer with a baby. My mother said that I cried the whole way back because every time she would go to nurse me, my father would slap my face away and push her off the ass and say, "Leave it to the Lord." I had teeth early, and he said that this was another sign of my evil nature, which should be hidden from the world. The slave Khan told my father that we would have to find a place to stay for the night, but my father urged us on further, saying, "We will only stay in a town of the Jews. I cannot stay amongst the enemy. It is unholy." So they finally found the town, behind a stone wall, but night had already fallen, and any good people were tucked in. My mother said that there were many bats about the walls of that city, and she took it as an omen of evil. They waited in the heart of the town. People passed but averted their eyes from us. Then, as the air grew chill, and 3 hours passed, an old bald man under a cape with gnarly hands asked Levi, "Why are you waiting out here in the dark?" My father replied, "I am on a mission of the Lord's. I have to get back to Beth tomorrow, but we need some place to bed for the night." He rattled through his bag and pulled out a loaf of bread. "See, we have bread to pay our stay, but we need some straw and a place in from the night." "Come on then, you may stay with me." He led them to his huge stone house, and they washed for dinner. The man had 2 lovely daughters, and they waited on us like servants. A knock came at the solid wooden door. The old man went to answer. There a mob with torchlights waited for him, grimy, stupid, and leering with drool, a pack of hyenas. "Who's staying with you? A priest? Send him out to us so we can fuck him up the ass." They all howled and laughed at this, ready to tear through the old man. He hid behind the door and called out to them, "No, no, you must not touch him, for he is a man of God. Leave us alone. But I have 2 virgin daughters, and I will send them out to you in his place." The crowd hissed and snarled. "He has a concubine. I will send her out." Then he barred the door. His daughters cried and hid. My father had been clutching my mother, hiding behind her and her many blue veils. Then he took her, unbarred the door as she bit and cursed, and said to the dirt, "Here, take her," threw her to the mob, breaking her bones, and barred the door. Chapter 8. I know these things are true because I was left with my mother's things that I cherished as religious relics till they fell to dust. She left me her journal and letters because she wanted me to know her, know the truth, filthy as it was. The next morning there came a scratching at the old man's door. One of the daughters summoned my father to answer, for the old man was sick in bed with fever. He moaned, "You have brought a curse upon me. Surely I have witnessed an angel of the Lord. Now go away from here, go home. Do not wait till night falls and the streets writhe with roaches." The house had been kept awake that night with the screams and curses of my mother and me. My father unbarred the door to find my mother there. She fell in, torn, broken, and bloodied, in a heap of shredded blue veils. "Get up, let's go." The slave gathered me and brought me to the door, wrapped in a scarlet scarf one of his daughters had given me. My mother could not move, so Levi threw her over his shoulder and loaded her onto his ass, and they traveled to Beth. I screamed along the way, and he allowed her to nurse me. Unclean blood. My mother was bedridden after that. The slave Con bathed her, but her body was badly broken from the mob of 40 men. She lay like that, wasted and staring for months, years, as if only the will of God kept her alive. She sometimes wrote and hid her books inside her trunk from her father's home. She begged Con, made him promise that when she died he would take me back to her father's home. I am his only child, and this child, Leviticus, is the last of his blood. He will take him in. She bade him to take along the trunk of her belongings, for if you don't, surely you will be cursed in the sight of God. Besides, my father is a much richer man than Levi, and you will be better cared for. Levi did not treat the slave well. My mother knew she was dying. She just put it off for my sake, my survival. I remember the night of her death, my first memory. I was 3. She was not beautiful then. Her face had been broken like a doll, and her green eyes were haunted. She was wasted, so fragile, and her skin was plagued with disease. She disgusted my father, who had brought all of this upon her. He would not touch her, and that was her only blessing, her only peace. He was a foul man. She had me in the bed with her, like always, and I had become fat by then. She said, "My beautiful angel," and smiled her broken smile before Levi came in the room from behind. This startled her because he didn't come in here anymore. He pushed me off the bed and smothered her beneath the pillow as he turned from the sight, from his deed. She did not kick, she did not fight because she couldn't. Then he threw her over his shoulder and carried her from the room. That night he prepared all of the meal. This was rare for him because as a priest he was supported and fed by the generosity of his people. He set me up at the table for the first time that I can remember. Then he fed me a sweet meat after giving thanks to the Lord our God. Con was waiting in the threshold, shaking and crying, for he knew what my father had done with my mother's body, and he too feared the Lord. My father only ate bread, and then he said the words, "You are not my son, you are demon spawn," and he hurled me to the street at 3 years old. Con ran and got my mother's trunk, which was small and had an iron latch. She told him where to find the key, sewn in the breast pocket of my nightgown, so he slipped out the back through the courtyard of palms and found me bruised in the street. He was afraid of me, but more afraid of my mother's spirit and the will of God, so he toted me all the way back to my father's house, and we hid in the forest under cloak of night. We got cold and hungry, but found that mother had thought of everything for us along the way, and packed it in the wooden trunk. I still have the trunk. It is made of cypress wood and lined in pitch. Then it had a beautifully lined interior of red embroidery. My mother did it herself from the wool of the firstborn lamb. There was a heavy woolen cloak, big enough for 2. She made this herself as well, and it was lined with magical herbs and gold. There were also dried figs and crackers for us to eat, and a lovely golden flask filled with wine. Her leather-bound journal was there, with her letters and carnelian ring.